when we stabilize the body and we learn to connect to our center, we are much more efficient, where we have less compressive forces on the vessels and nerves and joints. And so that body can literally push harder, even if that means it's during a rehab phase, because a lot of people are going to amazing PTs and rehab centers, but because certain parts of their body are so compressed, they wind up injuring themselves in the attempt to get better.
You're listening to the Seven Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Riechman.
Welcome back to the Seven Figure Leap podcast. I'm really excited today. We have another coaching session here, and I'm joined by a good friend, Scott Olsen. Scott and I were reflecting a little bit before we hit record, and we think we originally met because I was doing some training in Pat Flynn's SBI community. And I said, well, that's good because it's probably one of the strategies we're going to be talking about for Scott's business is how to get him in front of his ideal clients and be able to build relationships with people through education, which is really what I do. And that's what we're going to be doing today as I help coach Scott through this transition period he's in his business and where he's trying to go, and hopefully give him some really practical strategies that he can implement and you as a listener can implement as well. So Scott, thanks so much for being here, man. I would love for you to just give a brief introduction, give people a little context on your background, and then we'll dive into your business.
Nice. Awesome. And Dustin, thank you for having me. This is great. So, background and why I'm even here today in this opportunity. I have been a treatment specialist. I've been helping people with chronic pain and sports injuries for about 26 years now. So, I've been a sports rehab therapist. I've worked with orthopedic cases, hospital settings, elite sport teams, or performance centers. And through that, I have almost always worked one-on-one. And so I have a clinic in La Jolla, California. But the last few years of my working with people and coaching different aspects of movement and health so that they're staying out of pain has led to me doing some local seminars and workshops where my background in martial arts and Qigong gives me a different opportunity of working with the body and the mechanisms of the body to improve health. And so going forward, I'll be doing a lot more of that.
That's awesome. Well, completely tangential, but fun fact, I experienced Qigong for the last time, or not the last time, for the first time last week. What I was trying to say, I was actually at like a writing retreat in Puerto Rico, and one of the participants' husband is a practitioner and a teacher and has studied in China and some of these arts. And it was amazing. We got to do it on the beach. It was kind of hard to beat. As someone who hasn't had a lot of exposure to that world, I felt a real change. Like it was impactful for me. So I'll selfishly be absorbing some of the ways that you do this work and how you can lead people to understand it and appreciate it kind of in our Western culture. Because I know it's not as integrated, I guess, into how we think about wellness and health. But that's great. I know you have obviously a very deep expertise in this, 26 years, largely local, La Jolla, California, which is near San Diego. And so you've started to expand into some workshop environments. You're starting to see the benefits of sort of a one-to-many model. So yeah, let's talk then about the current day. And I know you're transitioning and making some changes, but maybe we think about today and the past 12 months and kind of where your business has been. You mentioned a lot of primarily one-on-one work. So what does that look like in terms of revenue, number of clients, working hours, and like, is it all Scott right now? Is there any sort of support or team?
There is no team. In the past, I've had a bigger clinic where I had other professionals, acupuncturists, massage therapists, etc. During the pandemic, I actually scaled back for many reasons. And so right now, it's my own clinic that is a treatment room plus a movement room. And through the years, I've just worked in so many different settings. But right now, this is the model that's working for me in the sense that even though it's just me, it's that sweet spot of not too many hours a week, a very quiet setting. I can create a lot of tangible change for people. But through that process too, I've realized that it my ambitions to finish writing a book, to teach more, keep getting, I'll say, hampered by the fact that, well, I'm still putting a lot of energy out every single week. And so I've realized I have to be a little more careful of how I'm creating a container around my commitments. So, practically speaking, my revenue range the last 3, 4 years has been between 160 to 185,000. My current rates per hour are $200 per hour. And all the as a note of transition, all the teaching opportunities, including a couple of keynotes I've given, they've all been by invitation. I've never sought them out. And so there is that next step of my own business savvy is really learning how to do this going forward. And any other details that are worth mentioning?
No, that's really good. I'll definitely ask some follow-up questions. So I guess just to break down the revenue. So 160 to 185,000, $200 an hour. I guess that equates to maybe 35 or something percent of your working hours are billable. Does that make sense? Like, so in a given week, you're, yeah, about 15 hours a week are billable hours. And then the rest are you're either off or you're marketing or your admin, doing all the other things that a business requires, right?
Yep. And a note on that is I've through my career, I've always had a problem scaling because if I, for example, do more than 25 sessions a week, my joints will start to break down. So I've always had this, depending on the year and my body, a cap of like, oh, maybe it's 20 sessions a week, maybe it's a little bit more, a little less. But that I realize is just not a great model going forward as I think about other things.
Yeah, you're getting older, as am I, and so there's financial reasons to scale your impact in the sense of going more one to small group or one to many, but there's also physical reasons because you can't. And a lot of people, you think of like dentists or anyone who got to be on their feet, using their hands, be very focused. They reach this point in their middle age where they just can't practice the number of hours that they practiced in the past, and it requires a shift in their business model. So that makes a ton of sense. And then I guess the other aspect of that I wanted two follow-up questions. I'll start with the easy one. You have your own location. You mentioned like sports teams and things. In the current version of your business, does everyone come to you for one-on-one sessions? Is that the simplest way to summarize? Yeah. And then in the past, have you done things where you went to them to like a sports facility and things like that, but you've really truncated that and now everyone comes to you?
I did. And that too is, I mean, I've had some great opportunities through the years with the Olympic Training Center, working with the Seattle Seahawks, working with Cirque du Soleil. But each of those commitments is time away from home and family and a very different daily schedule. And so, yeah, the last few years I've actually scaled back a little bit to work with my needs and my family's needs.
Okay. I love it. So it sounds like for all intents and purposes, you're currently satisfied with your work and it's meeting your needs and people come to you, you get to work the number of hours that your body can sustain and that you still feel maybe like you're doing your highest and best work. And yet I sense a yearning, and we've had other conversations that tell me this too. There is a desire to have a bigger impact, grow the business more. You mentioned about writing a book, teaching. Yeah, tell me a little more about that. Like, what do you have in mind when you think of, say, 12 to 36 months out? Like, where would you like this to pivot to in terms of still have a physical location but less hours, bring someone else in for the one-on-one? Are you out on a speaking tour? Are you writing a best-selling book? Like, tell me the Scott 5.0 or whatever version of your life you're on, and where you see you making your impact moving forward.
The ambition is there in a few different directions. And so part of it is how do I create a clear map for myself? Writing a book as choosing that as the anchor here is an example of the fact that I have benefited from an unusual tradition of knowledge through the Chinese martial arts I've studied. And that through my career in helping people with pain, I think gave me a lens of there's this incredible opportunity to improve our health and take our body to another level to support all the great work we're trying to do in life. And so, from that perspective of, I do want to have a bigger impact. I want to support a much bigger number of people. I know I can do that through teaching, through the curriculum I've created. I've taught in many different contexts to support nervous system, to support healing, to improve athletic performance, to do Qigong or longevity practices. And I've, through the years, been creating more of a framework of how to do this methodically and without too much complication so that people actually feel really quick, tangible results. And so, on that note, that's more than just I want to write a book to maybe inspire more people to live better, have better self care practices. Is there's a lot I can teach other professionals about how to stabilize the body, how to center the body and ground the body that have such specific payoff in different areas. And so I realize one of the avenues could be to create a certification course eventually, but beyond that specificity, I'm really motivated to teach more people this methodology, this opportunity, and to be a bigger, how to say, I, I do love giving talks. I've had this opportunity, I've enjoyed that, but to have a better conversation in the industry of how much movement as medicine can impact our lives without it being narrowed too specifically to the things we call exercise or the many other siloed kind of commercial industries that are currently around this concept.
Yeah, that's really rich. I think it'd be useful sort of unpack. You used I wrote the word professionals because you use that in a certain sense where you're like, yeah, I just want this knowledge, this wisdom, this framework, my all this lived experience I have, so that more professionals can use it, right? When you say professionals, do you intend that more like I want to train doctors, lawyers, and engineers? They're professionals, right? Or is it more train the trainer where I want to empower people who are already working with people to improve their health, wellness, exercise, and I want to inform sort of at that level so that it trickles down and has a ripple effect? Yeah, like when you think about who you want to reach in this next phase, like who would be that ideal amplifier, I guess, of your work?
That's a good way to say it. Well, there, I'll say there are two categories I'm very motivated to work with that fit within that phrase. One is the category of people who are really driven to do incredible things. I've been lucky enough that in the past that might include athletes, that might include performers, but among my current client base, there are some people who are doing incredible things in life. And if they're not careful, their body is not keeping up with how hard they push. And so, on a personal note, I'm absolutely motivated to work with more of those professionals. And some of them may be coaches and creators, maybe business owners. And that's where the concept of creating a group coaching program might be the best fit for that type of personality. But then this other layer is there are there are so many amazing groups of professional therapists, coaches, any from the somatic world to the physical therapy world to the personal training world. There's some great people out there. They often can be hard to find, but I have an unusual, I think through my career, an unusual breadth of how many of those professionals I've worked hand in hand with. And I can often see the gap of either their education or their current model, where sometimes but one or two things shared to that group or that person can create much more sustainable results for their client base. So that's this other component that might even feel more like a longer term commitment to me.
Okay. So I'm I love how you broke that down. That makes it really tangible into kind of two groups. And the way I'm going to phrase these, and you can tell me if this resonates. So, like, group one would be high achievers, still end receivers of your expertise who are going to put it into practice in their own body and life so that they can take whatever gifting they have and continue to make the biggest impact, amplify, grow, push, because they are naturally going to do that, but their body may not support the intensity at which they want to operate. And so, like you said, the athletes, performers, but maybe in this phase of life, entrepreneurs, business owners, executives who kind of need that next gear in a sense. And I really agree with you on that would be a prime place for a one to many group coaching model where you can take a group of people who have similar drive, ambition, kind of circumstances in life of being super busy and probably balancing family and work and all the other aspects. And they can come in a more intensive, condensed place and get kind of I don't even know if it's the minimum viable dose, but they can get what they need to make these sustainable changes for them on a personal basis. So it's the recipient of the magic and is an individual still, but it's a select group of individuals rather than every random person in La Jolla who can have proximity to your office. This would be online group coaching. Is that, yeah, love it. And then, so that's more of the B2C version, right? It's still direct to consumer, but these consumers are a much more selective group that you can serve online, and you're taking them through a specific framework so you can get them result in a group setting. And then the second group would be more the B2B. So, who are the professionals in the sense of therapists, physical therapists, athletic coaches, trainers, wellness providers, doctors, whoever who are already in the practice of wellness care. I was going to say healthcare, but really it's like this performance and wellness care. And that the word I wrote down as you're describing that world is optimization. It's like they already have their base of knowledge, they have the thing that they practice, but you could come in and optimize that by adding a little tweak or special sauce or missing piece to where they could be a more effective practitioner and maybe charge higher rates or be able to drive up market a bit because they have some more specialized knowledge.
Yeah, and build a reputation for really creating lasting change in their client base. I in the moment, to be clear, I have enough experience. I've worked with helping many different types of professionals so that it's not like I can say there's just one group that I want to work with in this range, but I'll anchor two different clear opportunities. One is what I'll call a little bit more of the internal goals or perhaps roadblocks that many of the people in the counseling or therapy or somatic experience space are supporting. And that is whether there's an actual pathology or mental illness, or frankly, just people are on the edge of being burned out because of their career or their performance level. The way that I teach to access breath and internal support is unusually grounding for the nervous system and reduces the cost of internal tension. And a lot of the through the years when I travel or when I have these opportunities to talk with these professionals, and by that I mean the counselors and coaches and whatnot, they are really good at what they do from a mindset, a narrative, kind of a belief system, and they don't necessarily have that many skills to ground these practices in the body for their clients to then take away and work on in themselves. And I've found consistently when the body feels more supported and integrated, the mind is less scattered, the heart is less scattered. And so I do see that as a really valuable direction for me to create opportunities and trainings for.
I love that. The word I wrote down with that is like protocol, almost like you have the thing you do so well, you're a therapist, you deal with mental health, and you just don't have the tools or an accessible protocol that you kind of add to your toolbox to where you don't need Scott there to do this, but Scott can train you to get this, yeah, protocol, right? Like this process method so that you can add that to the experience of your clients because it's going to have a multiplying effect on the work that you're an expert at speaking to that professional. Is that this isn't my world, but hopefully I'm like categorizing it. Yeah, cool. So you said that I think you said that was kind of one of two anchoring case study sort of applications of this. So people who deal with helping their clients or patients with internal struggle, internal roadblocks, burnout, mental capacity, and things like that. And then what's the second one? External?
External. And what's interesting is this more external one, because of how I've designed it, how I was taught, how I think about this stuff, can be applied more to a chronic pain scenario, such as migraine sufferers, as an example, or more to an athletic or high performance, because it's actually the same tools. When we stabilize the body and we learn to connect to our center, we are much more efficient. We have less compressive forces on the vessels and nerves and joints. And so that body can literally push harder, even if that means it's during a rehab phase. Because a lot of people are going to amazing PTs and rehab centers, but because certain parts of their body are so compressed, they wind up injuring themselves in the attempt to get better. And that's a tricky one for people to navigate. And a lot of what I teach helps support that.
Okay. So when we think about the professionals in this setting, that it's going to be physical therapists, performance trainers, coaches, athletic trainers, things like that, where they're dealing with people who have recovering from injury, they have chronic issues. I guess a migraine sufferer could be treated by all sorts of different practitioners, right? So would you say one of the challenges you're experiencing as you look forward is narrowing or defining the target audience, because you are in a situation which everyone kind of finds themselves in, where they get so deep into a body of work that they see it applicable to, like, everyone could really benefit from this, and yet marketing doesn't work when you do that, right? So you have to get more narrow in your focus. So yeah, tell me a little about, like, your thoughts on that, or maybe your struggles that you've experienced with that.
Yeah, well, you're nailing the conflict and the tension through the years, because I was teaching some of these things 10, 15 years ago, but it was always on the side, never gained momentum. I tried different versions. And yet, at the heart of my dedication to this is I've been refining things because I work one on one with people. So I've had thousands of hours of, let's try this. Okay, let me teach it a new way. Let's have it click even faster. And that's why I'm much more confident that it can work in these different directions, as you kind of pointed out. The to the short answer is yes. The market is still too varied, but I'm also confident in starting in one direction and building that reputation, because what I've really found is through the years I do best in some version of a partnership or an invitation, or we have shared interests. Let me see what I can offer. And that's really much more of a, even it is, those are all business exchanges, but that's also a very personal exchange.
Very relationship based, collaborative, sort of coming at it from a view of abundance, where the sum is great, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We can work together better than we could do separately. Of course, anyone that's listening to this show, that's my thing too. That's near and dear to my heart. And that's going to transition us really nicely, I think, into strategy and how to apply this. Before we go there, one thing I do want to double click on is the book. So you mentioned a book as sort of an anchoring point. I think it's a good forcing function. Can't write a book unless you know who you're writing it to. Where are you at in that process? And do you have are you dedicated to, or do you have a sense for, like, who will be the ideal reader of that book?
Is the clear answer, because I've iterated a few times. I realize I could, for example, choose to lower the expectation, write more of a, I'm going to call it a 70-page book instead of a traditional published book, in which case I could actually more readily do that for three different groups, because then I can actually make it way more relevant to that person I'm speaking to, as you had just shared. And so I realized that might be a step that frees me up and gives me a little more motivation to accomplish those tasks. The simplest point of reference in terms of, I'm an avid reader, I've been blown away by speakers and authors through the years. It's kindled that passion for me that have taken me on a journey that's lasted for decades. And I actually see a book as not for everyone, but for a few people that pick up that book, that just has that lasting impact. It like increases the call. And that's why I value it so much. And I've been in situations where I've come in to teach, but I didn't have a book. It was hard for the group to really position me. And I realized that it's a bit of a stumbling block at the level of expertise I have, that what I'll call that credibility marker of being published actually feels like it matters at this stage.
So I can relate a lot to this. So I am actively working on a book, and I've been wrestling with the exact same ideas of there's a book or multiple books, then there's the book, right? There's this pressure of sort of the legacy book. I think you actually nailed it in the sense that I wrote down small book and big book, right? And you said there's kind of like three small books, but those would be very practical and shorter and specific, whereas there's also this yearning to have this impact that other people have had on you with like the book that's more of a paradigm shift, and it's more of a the really big idea book. I think the good news is that the news that's freed me up a little bit is you can do all of the above with enough time, right? And so then it becomes a choice of which is the first book. And it's not the only book, it's just the first book. The path I'm choosing is to write a useful book. And you may have read it. There's a meta sort of book that does this. It's called Write Useful Books. And the whole premise, yeah, you got to read it. Scott, like that'll be one of your action items. It's a very short book. It's like intended to be able to read on a plane ride. And the whole premise of the book is it's in this shorter category of like write a really useful book that solves a specific problem for a specific reader and spreads by word of mouth. And he talks a lot in terms of like value per page. And you start and like your table of contents, if someone just read the table of contents, they would make progress towards the goal because you've already broken down the process that someone needs to follow to get the result. And that's a very different book than the book, the legacy book, right? So I'm working actively. I was in Puerto Rico last week at a writing retreat, finally getting started on a podcast guesting book. And in some ways, like podcast guesting is super useful. It's changed my life. I help a lot of people with that. I'm known for that. And there's also a sense of I know a lot more than that. I've had a lot bigger impact than that. I have a lot more to share than just a podcast guesting book. And yet, a podcast guesting book would be a really useful book and it would advance my business goals. And it would be a good lead generator and it gives me authority when I go speak on stages about marketing. And so I'm saying all that just to relate. Like, I totally get it. And ultimately, you can choose. But I do think there would be room here to consider if you think of there's like three of these useful books in you that you want to get done, maybe we start with one of those that's aimed specifically at your primary first target that we're going to talk about next. Like, who is that market? What do we want them to believe and be able to take action on so that I have authority and credibility? That opens a lot of doors to speaking. It doesn't take that long to create. And maybe there's a book two and a book three for slightly different audiences or for different applications. And ultimately, all that material can feed into the legacy book, right? It's still part of the same body of work. It's just not as big of a breath. So I talked a lot there, but any sort of responses, or am I kind of barking up the right tree in how you're feeling about the book project?
Yeah, and as you share that, I'm realizing I have thought about this many times, and there's already a bit of a sequence that I think I've been arriving at, and that is creating the practical book. Stage one, more for the creator, the entrepreneur in growth phase who's pushing hard, no longer young, needing more tools to support their body and their impact. And then dovetailed, hopefully soon after, is that a year after, is that months after, is touching upon that more internal, almost mental health, psychological opportunity, because some of that would be just as valuable for people running businesses or in the workforce or social media influencers who are getting burned out by all the new technologies. It is a very weird time we're living in.
Absolutely. Yeah. You could have a whole big chapter on AI and its impact on your internal compass
Yep.
and well being.
Open
Yeah.
story loops, closed story
Yeah.
loops. Do we even sleep at night? And so I could see that just being, even though I might pitch that a little bit more to the coaches and therapists, it still is like irrelevant to the bigger conversation. And then the other point of reference is, though I do want to teach my techniques to the professional audience that then can coach or train, as we talked about that. That feels like a smarter second or third step as I in one sense try to free up my current bandwidth, which has been so clinic focused. So that's where I thought the group coaching over the next 18 months, it's something I would enjoy doing. Also, it's a skill set I can refine and a new revenue stream. And that might start to create some of those openings where these other opportunities fit in much more neatly.
Yep. I totally agree. And I had actually written a similar sequence, and I was sort of naming your useful books in order. I'm like, I like that a lot. And when you think of I'll call it peer to peer market, or it's the therapists and the doctors and the wellness practitioners. I think let's call phase one, let's get Scott freed up from the clinic setting to where you're still doing a B2C model, but it's in small groups. And the key to do online group coaching is to speak to a specific outcome and as much as possible to a specific audience, right? So if you've got 60-day, 90-day program and you work with, let's just say, entrepreneurs, and you have a specific promise for them that, hey, at the end of 90 days, here's what's going to change in your life and your business and your impact because you've worked with me. That was all kind of a preamble to say, if that's your focus and that's the lane that you're specializing in the next phase of this, the practitioners and all these relationships, they have those people in their audiences too. And that's where this partnership model can start to thrive, right? Where there's a physical therapist that you have a great relationship, and they have some people in their roster who are entrepreneurs, business owners, and they're like, yeah, my buddy Scott, he's a peer. He's not getting in and stretching your knee and the stuff that I'm doing in the clinic, but I really recommend you go read his book and go to his seminar or come to his workshop and ultimately join his program. And of course, there's a sea of opportunity there when we talk about podcasting and guest training and in-person workshops and some of the stuff that you've already done. And the key there is the key to collaboration many times is specificity. It's like, I'm not trying to replace what you do as my peer, but I think I can serve some of your clients in this really specific way with the thing that I'm really good at. And I've got a program for that. And or I've got a free educational workshop, or I've got a book, right? In essence, that's what I do. That's my whole model, and how we met through SPI through Pat Flynn is Pat serves creators. Pat's a marketing genius. Pat's been a podcaster a lot longer than me. So why would Pat have me come do a workshop for his audience? Because I specialize in podcast guesting, right? And he doesn't. And so he was very open to, hey, you've got this really specific thing. You can come in for 45 minutes and teach my people. That's a win for Pat because it's new content and a fresh perspective. It's a win for his audience because they gain those things. It's a win for me because there's certain people in that audience who are like, yeah, I really want to go deep on that thing, right? And that's how we met. And I've had other clients come from that as well. And of course, I run a group coaching program. So I'm just reflecting back to you. I think you have that opportunity really well defined. And I think that, to me, also, I guess I'm concurring, that also seems like the next logical phase because it's kind of the shortest leap from where you're at. It's like taking clinical work, but taking a portion of it to a specific audience, which allows you to bring it online and do it in a small group setting. And it leverages the relationships you have with your peers without yet trying to say, I want to come to you and you pay me money and I'm going to certify you in my methods. Like, eventually we'll get there too. But now, for now, you can basically, they can be a conduit to their clients so that you can serve them in this setting. So that's a bit of a monologue, Scott, but like, is that resonating?
It tracks. It
Yeah.
really is in alignment.
Yeah. So then and again, this will be your journey and you can reflect on this as we go, but over the last maybe like 10 minutes we have left, let's run that out a little bit. So if we say the goal for the rest of this year and getting into next year is write the useful book that takes your protocol and your framework and points it at entrepreneurs and business owners and people that are in stressful professional settings that are on a mission and want to have a big impact and are starting to feel limited by their own physical and mental capacity to do that. Those are our people. Write that useful book, create a group coaching program that you should be able to charge a premium for, deliver online, which frees up a lot of replaces revenue that you'd otherwise have to be in person, in clinic delivering, or it's additive to that and you just double your income, and that'd be good too. So does that feel like a good place for us to focus for the rest of our time? We start thinking about how to find the people to feed that.
It does. I feel really confident, we'll say, on the curriculum side of a 2-month program to create, transformation. For me, it's the getting in front of the people. And I know my positioning's gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, but that refining that and then choosing to take this next step to get on more podcasts. Years ago, I was on podcasts, then I had a hiatus. Last summer, I was on one. We talked about that briefly, which is a great conversation of disconnection and meaning and being present by a fabulous man named Joshua Church. But at the time, I had no strategy, no like forward thinking, no call to action. And so, yeah, now it's time to organize.
And we'll pause here and we'll say, if I said, so far we haven't even talked about which podcast to be on and what you would teach and what your call to action would be, but just on where we've gotten in a sense of clarity and specificity about what we're trying to accomplish. If I said, hey, Scott, good news. I got you booked on 3 podcasts next week, and they're entrepreneurial podcasts and they're all about optimizing performance. But you can already see, and anyone listening to this conversation could see, oh yeah, like it would be way more clear what I want to talk about, what I want to teach, what my call to action is going to be. And it becomes obvious that you're speaking to a specific outcome. So you're going to get people to raise their hand to come go deeper with you on that, right? To get a free resource or to get some more training, which is then when you would invite them to a group coaching program. So a lot of times in in a coaching session like this, or just in the course of doing what I do, people start with the wrong question and they start with, which podcast should I be on? And I was like, well, we have a 5-step framework. I'm big on frameworks too. And the first step is purpose, because you can't answer the other steps until you know who you want to reach, what's the outcome you ultimately want to drive them to for their benefit and to grow your business, what transformation are you going to provide them. And once you have those things, then you can talk about the messaging and what do they need to hear and believe and feel the empathy for and the authority for, so that they're ready to take that next step with you if they're ready and qualified for your services. All that's step one. And we've talked a lot through that, even in our conversation. Step two then is which podcast to be on, right? Which seems like that's the obvious place to start. But after you get clear on step one, step two actually becomes really almost like a domino. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I would be, and so I'd actually love to hear in your words, if you think about this audience with this useful book that you're going to put together in this framework. And by the way, you don't need the book before you sell the group coaching program, but they kind of go hand in hand. But if I said, hey, we're talking to entrepreneurs and we're talking about performance and tools to support their body and their impact and all this breadth of experience that you bring to bear. And I said, Scott, which types of podcasts would you want to be on? What would you say? Like, I would imagine you already have some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'll say what comes top of mind are the podcasts that are already talking to active creators, meaning they're in a growth phase of their own work. They aren't that part of their business, whether they're speakers or behind the camera or whatever version, because, yeah, they have the right drive that I can speak to really well. And they are just at risk of burning out and breaking down as any other high performer. And the other, though it may even seem broader than that, are podcasts that are speaking to leaders or leadership. Most of my client base is over 60 in my current practice. I'm about 50 now. Like I there's something about the long view perspective that I gained through training Chinese martial arts, Tai Chi, Qigong, that is already speaking to people who are way more seasoned in their career.
We are so dialed in. I literally wrote the word seasoned as you were speaking it. Like, so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but sometimes it feels like maybe it's not the same market. Maybe it's a different group of people I could be speaking to. But there's a lot of people who might be second half, second stage of life, who they already have so much clarity and so much more leverage than they ever did when they were younger. And I realized, oh, there's a lot I can share with that group of people.
And from a business perspective, they tend to have more money. They tend to have more decisiveness. They're able to identify like this is a constraint, and they realize that they probably have more money than time, and they're willing to invest in shortcuts, and not shortcuts in the sense of, you know what I mean, in fast passes, if you will, like who not how, like more seasoned entrepreneurs, more seasoned business leaders realize going and trying to Google search or chat GPT the solution and figuring it out, they ain't got time for that. Like they're busy, their time is too valuable. They have some resources. They just want to go pay the expert to help them, right? And so I love this idea of a seasoned creator, seasoned leader who has kind of two aspects here. There's the general audience that we want to approach, which is these seasoned creators and professionals and entrepreneurs. I think we can start to get it. I'm 47, like I'm in that group too. Like they're past they've hustled and grinded a lot to get where they are, and now they don't want to do that to get where they want to go next, right? And they probably are balancing kids and maybe teenage kids and aging parents. Like there's a lot of these sort of external weights on their shoulders, and they would love the idea of just tell me, lead me exactly through the right things to do with my body and my mind. And they're open to this wellness world that you are an expert at. So there's this dartboard we've established that these people live on, right? And then in the bullseye of that would be sort of a think of like that's the canvas. And if we wanted to draw an intersection on the canvas, it's really the bullseye. I would say it's people that they are at least problem aware and they're probably moving towards solution aware. So we already know their state of life, a little bit about their circumstances and how their goals and what they're driven by. That's the dartboard. The bullseye we really want to talk to specifically would be they're having these problems, right? And so, what are the problems that they experience? And if we had more time, I'm sure you could articulate for 20 minutes a lot of the problems because you work with these people every day, right? Burnout, chronic fatigue, headaches, joint pain, lack of energy. There's a lot more like desire in them than they feel they have the physical or mental capacity to do. They're starting to resent the fact that, man, I was a college athlete and now I can't even make it past lunch without needing a nap. Like these are all like problems that they're like, these things are limiting my potential and I frustrated. So we're at least talking to them there. And then the ones that are going to be even more in that bullseye are going to become more solution aware, where they've started to look for therapies, meditation practices. They've started studying a little bit. Maybe they've started taking some Tai Chi classes, or they're sort of like moving toward finding Scott. And when they hear Scott talk, they're gonna be like, "This is it. This is exactly the solution I've been looking for." Not everyone's going to be that far down that spectrum. So we really want to focus our partnerships and podcasting opportunities. Make sure we're on the right dartboard. Like most of the people we're speaking to are in that audience, and then we want to speak a lot to the bullseye where it's like, hey, if you're experiencing these problems, if you feel this way, if you have this circumstance, if your day looks like this, here's the good news. This is what life is like on the other side when you address it and you get the right help. And some people are already, and that's the bridge between what we call like before island, where you find them, and after island, where they want to be. There's a bridge between the two. You're the bridge. Your coaching program is a bridge. Your book is a bridge. Some people are going to be halfway across the bridge and like ready to get to the other side. And some people are going to be stuck on before island and don't even realize there is a bridge. And you're going to speak to both audiences, and people will go across that bridge at different speeds. But hopefully those analogies make sense, because the picture I'm trying to create here is the hardest part of this is defining before island. Like, who are we speaking to? What are they feeling? You have a very clear bridge, which is great, because I work with a lot of people who are like, I'm on after island, but I don't really know how I got there. And like, I love the people on before island, but I don't really know how to coach. I don't really know I don't know what the framework would be. You've got a very defined bridge. It's just us putting that bridge between the right two islands. And then you just go speak to people on before island, and they all run across, not all, but the right ones run across the bridge and want to work with you. So how is that feeling? And then we'll close out in the last 5 minutes with maybe a little more direction on next steps that you can go find the people on before island.
Yeah. Well, the analogy you gave is a really good way for me to orient because I have a lot of knowledge that I've built up, but also the many ideas, sometimes the biggest opportunity is just to pause and kind of reorient, like which direction should I be looking? And so that the visual you just gave me was really helpful on that.
Good. And so, assuming you've got the bridge, and I know that you do, let's just spend the balance of our time talking about how do we get invitations to these groups of before island people, right? Like, who, in other words, like who's already got them in their audience where you can come and be build the bridge to the after island for the stuff that you do, right? And honestly, I think we've gotten there in on the podcast front in a large sense. It's you have a specific topic you want to cover, a specific promise for that audience, and we know who the audience is we're talking to. And I think we've got numerous specific verticals that we could go after. Like we talked about entrepreneurship, sort of. I really like the idea of people who are probably had a successful corporate career and they're growing their business and they're in this phase of life and they're realizing that in many ways they're the roadblock for the first time, or leaders who are, yeah, they're lacking energy for the first time, burnout. I mean, there's just a wealth of opportunity there that we could tap into on podcasts for sure. And then the other side of this, which you've already done some of, but it wasn't targeted, is so podcasts are one form of partnership where like that is an aggregation of your ideal market and people listen in, and you could just do podcasting and this would work. The other one I really like to think about is places to guest train. So it's a little deeper, it's a little more like down that awareness spectrum. And you've mentioned you've done this, but by invitation only. But anything come to mind there, like associations or communities or other practitioners who are very complementary to the work you do and you could come into their audience and serve in this specific way? Does anything kind of jump to mind when you think of this one audience of the entrepreneur, creator, speaker, leader?
Yeah. Yeah, the most obvious one right now is there's a lot more interest and talk around the nervous system regulation space. And I have a unique perspective on how the body can better support that. So uh, I think that would be an easy fit in terms of me talking about a slice of that pie, but not necessarily being the nervous system person, because there's some great people out there.
Yep. And so my playbook with our clients is, and you don't get here immediately, but as the goal cadence would be if you were on one targeted podcast a week. Again, we have a system running to support that. So it's not like you're doing all the legwork, but just imagine a scenario where basically you check your calendar. Hey, it's Friday. I've got a 30-minute interview. Next Friday, I've got one in the morning. So every week you got a podcast that is on the dartboard. So you're out there talking to these entrepreneurial leadership audiences, and there's enough to do that for the next decade, right? And we want to be targeted in how we do that and very intentional. But we do that once a week. And then our goal is once a month, we get a deeper partnership where maybe you're going into a physical setting in California, or you're coming in as an association speaker, you're coming to a conference of physical therapy, and you're coming to talking about nervous system regulation. There's a lot of these. I personally find almost all my partnerships, these deeper embedded trainings through podcast guesting. So the podcast guesting activity actually helps to be a discovery tool for the partnerships. So I was on, as a live example here, I was on Pat Flynn's podcast. It went well. And I said, "Hey, Pat, is there any way I can serve your community?" He said, "Yeah." And I actually did three of them. I don't remember which one we met in, but I went to his mastermind and did a deeper training. He had a cohort based course, is actually on podcast hosting. I went in there and did a special session on guesting to grow your podcast. And then there was a third one that was sort of their mid level community. And then that story goes on. Then I was at Craft and Commerce, a conference, and then because I developed a relationship with Pat, he's like, "Hey, you want to come to this dinner with me?" I said, "That'd be amazing." And then I met all these other speakers, and some of them have become clients, and now they're all partners in different ways, right? And that's how this works. And so you don't need to sit here today and say, April, May, June, July, I know exactly where I'm going to be doing partnerships, but you have the benefit of many relationships, many experiences, and peers in the industry where you probably could sit down if I made you just write a list of all the potential people you could call and say, "Hey, I'd love to come do a guest training. I'm specializing in this. I'm writing a book on this thing. Would that be useful to your audience?" Many people are going, "Heck yeah, come on." But even for the listeners, if you don't have Scott's Rolodex of experience in that way, podcast guesting is a great way to discover those partnerships too, because many hosts, many of the other guests on a given show, some of the listeners also have communities, masterminds, group coaching programs where you can come in and be a specialist alongside the work that they do and be additive to the mix. So So, Scott, I know we're running up against the time. I want to definitely tell people where to find you. Before we do that, any main takeaways or insights that you're taking away from this kind of rapid fire conversation we've had the last 55 minutes?
Yeah, well, the two biggest I think are, as you had shared, the before island, after island, and the bridge. And that is a really clear way for me to orient. And it's somehow it really clicked. So that's really helpful for me.
And the freeing thing there is there's lots of different before islands that you can eventually access. We just want to pick one to start with. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this piece that you just shared about how you're encourage scheduling podcasts or those there there's something so natural about when there's momentum, the opportunities arrive.
100,000%. Yes. Yeah.
And there's no way I could research enough to create. I mean, of course, but some of those true gems come in motion, in momentum. And I really like just the simplicity of that cadence of like, this is how you do it. So that was very helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, we run a mastermind and that was literally like, that was on the whiteboard in our fall retreat. And these are all business owners that are multiple six figures, seven, some multiple seven figures. And I was like, here's my experience. I think a seven figure solopreneur business can completely be fueled with the right clarity with one podcast a week and one partnership a week. As we started to unpack that, the light bulbs are going off of people like, that's actually exactly what I did, or like a version of that, or like, yeah, I can totally see how that's possible. And I think the theme of that retreat was simplicity scales, and the idea that like you don't need all the different tools, you just need the right tools, and you want the tools, the marketing tools, I should say, that play to your strengths. And I think, Scott, you're a natural educator. You have a ton of lived experience. You got really cool stories, and so yeah, podcast guesting I think is a natural fit for you. And then related to that is these deeper partnerships that will come from that and that can also live alongside that. And that's my whole model. We built a seven figure business doing exactly that. And I'm 1,000% confident that you can do that if that's what your desire is. And I think the big constraint that we've solved for today is just saying there's many things you're going to teach, there's many audiences you're going to reach. We just got to pick one to start with, because getting in motion with the first one is how you're going to get the clarity to the next one, and it's how you're going to create the first book and the first group coaching program, so that you have assets and clarity and income that frees you up from the current kind of dollar per hour model that you're in with your physical location. So awesome. Well, yeah. Well, I'm grateful that you were so transparent. We made, I feel like, a ton of progress today in less than an hour. So, if people are listening, our audience is generally creators, entrepreneurs, and many of them are as old as me. So, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and your work?
Yes. So you can find me at bodyreliance.com, where everything I'm doing going forward and my next phase of life is helping people rebuild a body they can trust. And there's a chance to join a newsletter and other things. Of course, much more will be coming your way. So thank you.
That's a really good domain. So bodyreliance.com. Well, Scott Olsen, you're amazing, man. I appreciate having you as a guest. And I think there's so many people who are going to relate to your story and be able to take action as a result of you being here and opening up and strategizing together towards the future. So thanks again for being here.
I hope so. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you so much.